Sidney Poitier and Joanna Shimkus appear together in the 1969 film The Lost Man. During production, the two fell in love, eventually marrying in 1973 and remaining together for the rest of their lives in one of Hollywood's most enduring relationships. The first recognized American casualty in Vietnam, Sergeant Richard Fitzgibbon Jr., was not killed by the enemy but murdered by fellow American Sergeant Edward Clark, who was drunk. Clark then fell to his death while fleeing the police shortly afterward. If these pictures made you feel something, drop a comment below and let me know which story hit you the hardest. These people deserve to be remembered. A like and subscribe costs you nothing. The Smashing Pumpkins are photographed in 1992 by Martin Goodacre. Jimmy Chamberlin, Billy Corgan, Darcy Retzky, and James Iha are pictured during the early years of a band that would become one of the most commercially successful and critically recognized alternative rock acts of the entire decade. Neighborhood Rascals pose outside their car in the 1910s. The group stands together in the casual way of young people who know each other well, photographed in the particular informal style of early 20th century street photography before posing for cameras became a rehearsed and self-conscious act. Jerry Samuels, performing as Napoleon XIV, was born in New York City on May 3, 1938. He is best known for his 1966 novelty song, They're Coming to Take Me Away Ha Ha, which reached #1 on the charts and became one of the era's most memorable recordings. Ilez Dervishvik was the youngest soldier to serve in the Austro-Hungarian army. His photograph documents the reality of child soldiers within the imperial military, a practice not uncommon during the First World War when young boys were enlisted or volunteered before reaching any recognized age of military service. Sahrawi women are photographed in May 1976 during the early days of the Western Sahara War. The conflict began after Spain withdrew from the territory, triggering a struggle between Morocco, Mauritania, and the Polisario Front, fighting for an independent Sahrawi state that continues in various forms today. Prince Charles and Princess Diana are photographed on vacation in the Bahamas in 1982 during what the caption describes as happier times. The image captures the couple in a relaxed, informal setting before the deterioration of their marriage became publicly known and widely documented in following years. The column of Marcus Aurelius in Rome was completed around 193 AD. Its carved relief decoration spirals up the entire shaft, documenting the emperor's military campaigns in extraordinary detail, a level of narrative and artistic complexity that has fascinated historians, artists, and visitors for nearly 2,000 years. Tom Poston, known for his role in Mork and Mindy, is remembered 19 years after his passing. Poston was a versatile American comedian and actor whose long career spanned television, Broadway, and film, earning him widespread affection from audiences across several decades of American entertainment. A young farmer's son dips water from a milk can in Williston, North Dakota, in 1937. The photograph documents rural domestic life during the late Depression era, capturing an ordinary childhood task in a farming community during one of the most economically difficult decades in American history. St. Barnabas Cathedral in Nottingham was built in 1842 by Augustus Pugin to serve the growing Catholic population of the city. Pugin also helped design the Houses of Parliament, and this Gothic revival structure remains one of the finest examples of his ecclesiastical architectural work in England. A young man strikes a confident pose for the camera in 1969. The photograph captures the particular self-assurance of youth at the end of a decade that had transformed fashion, music, politics, and social attitudes in ways that made standing in front of a camera feel entirely different. Indonesian dictator Suharto smokes a cigar and target shoots on his family ranch in 1994. He overthrew Sukarno in 1967, instigated the mass killing of up to 1 million people, ruled for over 31 years, and accumulated a personal fortune estimated at up to $35 billion. Frank Lentini was born with 3 legs, 4 feet, 16 toes, and 2 sets of functioning genitalia due to an absorbed parasitic twin. He became a celebrated sideshow performer in America, lived a remarkably full life, married, had 4 children, and died in 1966 at the age of 77. Bob Marley and the Wailers are photographed in Jamaica in 1972. Pictured left to right are Bunny Wailer, Bob Marley, Carlton Barrett, Peter Tosh, and a Stone family man Barrett, the core lineup of a band that would bring reggae music to a worldwide audience within just a few years. Mary Hopkin was born in Pontardawe, Wales, on May 3, 1950. She is best known for her 1968 UK #1 single Those Were the Days, and was one of the first artists signed to the Beatles' Apple Records label after Paul McCartney discovered her on a television talent show. The siege and relief of Chitral in 1895 took place on the northwest frontier in what is now Pakistan. British and Indian forces relieved a besieged garrison after a 46-day siege, in one of the last major colonial military engagements on the Afghan frontier before the 20th century began. A young couple and their friend pose with their Lincoln Continental in the 1970s. The large American luxury car was a status symbol of its era, and the 3 figures stand beside it with the easy confidence of people who know exactly what they want the photograph to say. Alfred Hitchcock's 1940 adaptation of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca is described as one of the caption writer's all-time favorite films. The psychological thriller won the Academy Award for Best Picture and remains one of Hitchcock's most celebrated works, the only one of his films to win that particular award. A woman describes being photographed in 1986 with dramatically damaged hair, explaining that she had permed it the day after dyeing it, causing it to snap off entirely. She is the blonde in the photograph, and the explanation makes the image a small and relatable personal comedy of errors. Christina Hendricks is photographed during her goth phase around 1992 to 1993, years before she became widely known as an actress. The image captures her in the particular aesthetic of early 1990s alternative youth culture, dark and deliberate, before her professional career redirected her public image entirely. Iggy Pop performs with the Stooges at the first Met Festival at the Met Sports Center in Bloomington, Minnesota, on March 20, 1970. The performance was one of the early landmark shows in the career of a band that would become enormously influential on punk and alternative rock. A young French girl shows off her cat in 1959. She holds the animal up for the camera with the particular pride children take in their pets, photographed in a simple and warm domestic moment that needed no special occasion or setting to be worth preserving permanently on film. Alexandra Daddario wears Carolina Herrera Autumn-Winter 2022 to the 2022 Vanity Fair Oscar party. The appearance was widely covered in fashion media, with the gown drawing significant attention as one of the more elegant and formally composed looks of an evening known for its competitive celebrity dressing. Charles Laughton made his first professional stage appearance at the Barnes Theatre in London on April 28, 1926, playing Ossip in a production of Nikolai Gogol's comedy The Government Inspector. The performance marked the beginning of a theatrical career that would eventually make him one of Britain's most celebrated actors. Brothers Richard Lucas, aged 10, and John Lucas, aged 8, play in the snow after a Michigan snowstorm in February 1969, photographed by Ken Hamblin for the Detroit Free Press. The image captures an ordinary childhood joy that existed without distraction in a world before the internet arrived. The Empire State Building opens in New York City on May 1, 1931. Built in just over a year during the Great Depression, the 102-story skyscraper became the tallest building in the world at the time and remains one of the most recognized structures in American architectural history. INS Mahendragiri is one of the newest frigates of the Nilgiri class, currently serving in the Indian Navy. The vessel represents India's ongoing investment in domestically designed and built naval surface combatants as the country works to expand and modernize its fleet across the Indian Ocean region. Workmen are photographed aboard the Italian battleship Giulio shortly before her scrapping begins in the 1950s. The Giulio had served the Italian Navy through the Second World War and is seen here at the end of her operational life, being prepared for the dismantling process at the shipbreaking facility. Economist H. Hjalmar Schacht takes the stand at the Nuremberg Tribunal on days 120 and 121 in May 1946. His testimony became one of the most intellectually combative of the entire proceedings, with Schacht successfully outmaneuvering the prosecution through his academic precision and careful manipulation of language and economic definitions. HMS Eagle was a British aircraft carrier launched in 1918. The vessel served the Royal Navy during the interwar period and into the Second World War, operating across multiple theaters before being eventually replaced by newer and more capable carrier designs as naval aviation technology rapidly advanced and changed. HMS Ark Royal launches a Harrier GR-9 aircraft in 2010. The Ark Royal was the Royal Navy's last conventional fixed-wing aircraft carrier before being decommissioned that same year as part of British defense cuts, ending a chapter in British naval aviation that the Harrier had defined for several decades. Ford Motor Company adopts a 5-day 40-hour work week policy for its automotive factory workers on May 1, 1926. Henry Ford's decision was a landmark moment in America and labor history, setting a standard that would eventually spread across industries and become the basis of modern workplace time expectations. A frontier soldier is photographed in the early 1900s in a portrait that documents military life on the American frontier during the final years of a period that had defined the nation's westward expansion. He stands in uniform, composed for the camera, at the edge of a changing world. A leather and iron chevron, a piece of horse armor for protecting a horse's head, is dated to 17th century India. The object represents the sophisticated tradition of equestrian military equipment produced across the Mughal Empire and other Indian kingdoms during a period of intense cavalry-based warfare across the subcontinent. A Sabaean bronze plaque dated between 1000 and 800 BCE from Zafar in Yemen represents the ancient South Arabian civilization of the Sabaeans, whose kingdom flourished in the Arabian Peninsula and produced remarkable bronze work and monumental inscriptions documenting their history, religion, and political organization across that era. Fitness figures Tonya Knight and Marjo Selin trained together in a Finnish gym in 1985, months before the Miss Olympia competition. The image documents the intense preparation elite competitive bodybuilders undertook during a decade when women's bodybuilding was growing rapidly in both athletic seriousness and public visibility worldwide. Kurt Russell is photographed on the set of Stargate in 1994. The science fiction film, directed by Roland Emmerich, cast Russell as Colonel Jack O'Neill leading a military team through an ancient Egyptian portal to another world, becoming a commercial success that eventually spawned a long-running television franchise. USS William Porter is photographed after being struck by a Japanese aircraft that caused an explosion below the waterline at Okinawa on June 10, 1945. The destroyer sank shortly after the attack, becoming one of the final American warships lost during the Okinawa campaign in the Pacific War. College students are photographed at a party in 1979. The image captures the informal social life of American campus culture at the end of a decade, defined by significant political and cultural change. Young people gathered in the particular relaxed and unguarded way that only parties and close friends allow. Two German tank crew members use a captured Sherman tank as a Butterpanzer in 1944. German forces regularly pressed captured Allied equipment into service when their own supply lines could not keep pace with battlefield losses, giving familiar vehicles a new and unexpected role on the opposite side of the war. A woman's hat known as the brelotte, worn as part of the traditional national costume of Bresse from Bourg-en-Bresse in Burgundy, is photographed as a preserved 19th century garment. The distinctive regional headwear represents the rich tradition of local costume that varied significantly across different French regions during that period. Robert Wadlow poses with his brothers in 1936. Wadlow was the tallest person in recorded history, standing 8 feet 11 inches at his death in 1940 at the age of 22. As the Guinness Book helpfully noted, Robert is the one wearing glasses in the photograph. A young girl poses in 1965 in front of a fake Christmas fireplace made entirely from cardboard. The person sharing the image recalls this as something families genuinely did before the era of mass consumer decoration, a homemade seasonal display that served the same warm purpose as any other. The LZ-129 Hindenburg makes its final flight over Lakehurst, New Jersey, on May 3, 1937. 3 days after departing Frankfurt with 97 passengers and crew, it caught fire while attempting to dock, killing 36 people and ending the era of commercial transatlantic passenger airship travel permanently. Chernobyl firefighters are treated at a Kiev hospital after the 1986 disaster, where a different treatment approach from the one used in Moscow is credited with helping almost all of them survive. The divergence in medical protocols produced dramatically different outcomes for patients across the two treatment locations. On May 3, 1968, the Jimi Hendrix Experience recorded Voodoo Chili, later featured on the Electric Ladyland double album. Guitar World named Hendrix's solo on the track the 11th greatest guitar solo of all time in their ranking of the 100 greatest guitar solos ever recorded. Yoko Ono and her first husband Toshi Ikiyanagi are photographed in their street loft in 1961. Ono had married the Japanese composer in 1956, and the two lived and worked in New York's avant-garde art scene before their marriage ended and Ono's life took a very different direction. In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives passed the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, raising tariffs to collect more federal revenue during the Great Depression. The act is widely regarded by economists as having worsened the Depression by triggering retaliatory tariffs from trading partners that severely reduced international trade. Schoolboy Joseph Drozd does his homework on top of a milestone in Poland in 1931. The image captures a child finding an unconventional workspace in the open air, a small and human detail preserved in a documentary photograph from a country about to enter one of history's most devastating decades. HMS Dragon operates in the Eastern Mediterranean in a photograph documenting the Royal Navy's continued presence in one of the world's most strategically significant bodies of water. The Type 45 destroyer is the most advanced air defense ship currently operated by the British Naval Fleet in active service. Peel's Castle was built between 1873 and 1914 for King Carol I of Romania and contains 170 rooms, each decorated in a different style. The Honor Hall features 4,000 pieces of carved walnut wood with 0 nails used. It was the first European castle with central heating and electricity. Coney Island Boardwalk is photographed in 1984. The famous Brooklyn shoreline attraction had been a center of American popular entertainment since the late 19th century, and by 1984, it retained its distinctive character as a public space where the city's diversity gathered freely along the edge of the ocean. Professor L. Kinzelski of Kiev risked his career and personal freedom to save Chernobyl firefighters by using his own unconventional treatment method. His willingness to defy official medical protocols in the aftermath of the 1986 disaster is credited with saving lives that conventional Soviet treatment approaches would have lost. An aerial photograph of Philadelphia, taken for a bulletin titled 100 Years in Philadelphia, is published in 1947. The image documents the city from above during the post-war period, capturing the dense urban landscape of one of America's oldest and most historically significant cities from an elevated perspective. A historic house in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, used as a schoolhouse in 1871, is photographed before its roof collapsed in recent years. The building represents the everyday architecture of 19th-century rural Pennsylvania, constructed without the expectation of permanent preservation and slowly surrendering to the weight of neglected time. A Chorara rectangular vessel with a prone human figure on top is dated between 1200 and 300 BC from Ecuador. The Chorara culture was one of the most artistically sophisticated pre-Columbian civilizations of coastal Ecuador, known for their technically accomplished and expressive ceramic work across that extended period. Robert Todd Lincoln, 78 years old and the only surviving son of President Abraham Lincoln, is helped up the steps at the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. in 1922. He was the last living person with a direct personal memory of the assassinated president. Star Trek cosplayers attend the 25th World Science Fiction Convention in New York City in 1967. The convention took place just 1 year after the original Star Trek series premiered on television, capturing the very beginning of what would become one of the most enduring fan communities in science fiction history. HNLMS Tromp returns to the Netherlands in 1946 for the first time since the beginning of the Second World War, photographed in Zaandam. The Dutch light cruiser had served throughout the war far from home, and her return marked a deeply significant homecoming for a vessel that had survived the entire conflict. A Moche blind figure effigy stirrup vessel from Peru dates to between 100 and 700 AD. The Moche civilization of coastal Peru produced some of the ancient world's most expressive and technically sophisticated ceramic portrait vessels, documenting the physical diversity and social roles of the people they depicted. Ugandan dictator Idi Amin and Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi review a military parade together in 1975. The two leaders shared an alignment built on anti-Western sentiment and Arab solidarity, with Gaddafi providing financial and military support to Amin's brutal regime during some of its most violent years. Arnold Schwarzenegger is photographed on the day he became a United States citizen in 1983. He had emigrated from Austria in 1968 and built his career as a bodybuilder and actor before completing the naturalization process that made his American citizenship official on this particular day in September. Gunnar Carson and his lead sled dog Bolto are photographed in 1925 after delivering diphtheria antitoxin to Nome, Alaska, saving the city from a potentially devastating epidemic. The journey became known as the 1925 Serum Run to Nome, and Bolto was celebrated as a national hero across America. USS Manchester, a light cruiser, is photographed in the Pacific Ocean in August 1950. The vessel was serving during the early months of the Korean War, RT of the American naval presence that was rapidly mobilizing to support United Nations forces on the Korean Peninsula following the North Korean invasion. In 1979, Casio produced a calculator that also functioned as a cigarette lighter, becoming known as the calculator. The device combined two entirely unrelated functions in a single object, representing the particular spirit of late 1970s consumer electronics innovation that produced genuinely unusual and memorable novelty products during that period. Gandharan gold Buddhist reliquary box inlaid with garnets and bowenite dates to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE from the Kushan Empire in ancient Pakistan. The object represents the extraordinary artistic and religious traditions of Gandhara, a region that produced some of the finest early Buddhist art anywhere. Reverend Gary Davis was born in Lawrence, South Carolina, on April 30, 1896. Blind since birth, his guitar-picking style influenced Bob Weir, Woody Mann, Rory Block, and David Bromberg, among many others, making him one of the most significant fingerpicking guitarists in American blues and gospel music history. Bronze tiger plaque from China's Han Dynasty is dated between 206 BC and 220 AD. The tiger was one of the most powerful symbols in Chinese culture, associated with strength, courage, and protection, and bronze plaques depicting tigers were produced across the Han period for decorative and ritual purposes. 3 Italian men dressed in suits are photographed together in 1917. They stand formally composed during the 3rd year of the First World War, in which Italy was fighting on the Allied side against Austria-Hungary, suffering enormous casualties along the Isonzo River front throughout the bitter campaigns of that year. An African-American student eats lunch alone after being newly integrated into a high school in 1959. The image captures the isolation of desegregation, a young person sitting in a space that was legally open to them but remained socially hostile in nearly every way that mattered to a teenager. Coptic triptych with crucifixion from Egypt, dated between the 13th and 15th centuries, is held at the Coptic Museum in Cairo. The work represents the rich Christian artistic tradition of Egypt's Coptic community, which maintained a continuous religious and cultural identity across centuries of changing political rule. Robert E. Lee is photographed around the age of 38 alongside his son William Henry Fitzhugh Lee, approximately 8 years old, around 1845. The portrait captures a future Confederate general as a relatively young United States Army officer, still 15 years away from the war that would define his legacy. Children play in the snow on December 29, 1936, in an American winter photograph. They are bundled against the cold and moving through a snowy landscape, captured in the particular joy of children encountering fresh snow in the way that a winter afternoon without screens or schedules allowed entirely. The Galata Tower in Istanbul is a medieval Genoese watchtower built at the highest point of the demolished walls of Galata, located in the Beyoğlu district. Now officially the Galata Tower Museum, it has stood for nearly 7 centuries as one of the most recognizable landmarks on the Istanbul skyline. HMS Prince of Wales arrives at Glenmallan in Scotland to take on ammunition in a photograph documenting routine naval logistics. The carrier is loading ordnance at one of the Royal Navy's primary ammunition facilities on the Firth of Clyde as part of her operational preparation before deployment. Louis Napoleon, the future Napoleon III, is painted as a captain in the Bernese artillery of the Swiss Army in 1836 by Félix Cottereau. He is 28 years old in the portrait, living in exile in Switzerland and still decades away from becoming Emperor of the French in 1852. Gisele Bündchen attends her first Met Gala in 1999. The Brazilian supermodel was at the very beginning of her rise to becoming one of the highest earning and most photographed models in the world, and her first Met Gala appearance marked an early step into the global fashion elite. Audrey Hepburn is photographed at her home in London in 1990, the year before she was diagnosed with the abdominal cancer that would take her life in January 1993. She is 61 years old in the image, still carrying the elegance that had defined her public presence across 6 decades. Little John F. Kennedy Jr. waits for his father, President Kennedy, to land at Camp David in October 1963, 1 month before the president was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, leaving his young son fatherless at the age of 3 years old. 12-year-old Christopher Walken rolls out dough with his brother Glenn at their father's bakery in the United States in 1955. The future Oscar-winning actor is photographed doing ordinary domestic work years before anyone could have predicted the singular and unmissed, acable screen career that lay ahead of him. The forward 14-inch gun turrets of the British battleship HMS King George V are photographed in March 1941. The vessel was one of 5 King George V-class battleships built for the Royal Navy and played a significant role in the hunt and sinking of the German battleship Bismarck that same year. The banyan was an informal house robe worn by wealthy men in 18th century Europe, combining comfort with the luxurious textile craftsmanship of that prosperous era. Kapala, made from a ram's skull, is photographed as a ritual object approximately 100 years old, but connected to a tradition stretching back thousands of years. While most people associate the Kapala exclusively with human skulls, sacred animals were also used in certain Tibetan Buddhist ritual traditions. Sidney Poitier and Joanna Shimkus are photographed on their wedding day on January 23, 1973. The couple had fallen in love while making The Lost Man in 1969 and remained married until Poitier's death in January 2022, one of Hollywood's most enduring and genuinely private long-term relationships. Men gather outside the Long Island Hobby Shop in Hempstead, New York, in 1939. The storefront and its small crowd of gathered men document the particular social character of American commercial streets during the late Depression era, where a shop front could serve as an informal neighborhood gathering point. Burned-out hotel in Northampton County, Pennsylvania, is photographed with remarkable woodwork still visible in the ruins. The surviving fireplaces and carved details speak to the quality of the original construction, a building of evident craftsmanship slowly being reclaimed by the decay that follows fire and long abandonment. The first time Captain Kirk encountered a Klingon is depicted in a scene from the original Star Trek television series, which premiered in 1966. The Klingons became one of science fiction television's most enduring antagonist species, eventually developing into a fully realized culture with their own language and complex history.